Today, we are opening up an extraordinary exploration into the life of Kirk Douglas. He was a figure whose sheer force of will really defined the latter half of Hollywood's golden age.
He really did.
His journey spanned 103 years, moving from crushing poverty and very bottom rung of society
Right.
to becoming one of the most powerful and demanding stars on screen and behind the camera.
And we have a really comprehensive stack of source material today. It meticulously tracks Douglas's relentless ambition, the powerful, almost explosive acting persona he cultivated, and the complex entrepreneurial decisions that truly shaped his legacy.
We're talking about his role in challenging the Hollywood blacklist, right?
Exactly. His groundbreaking, yet sometimes, disputed role in challenging the corrosive impact of the blacklist. And we'll also be addressing the profound complexities and shadows of his later personal life.
So our mission for you, the listener, is to understand the mechanics of self-creation. How did a man born Isser Danielovich leverage just raw intensity and sheer self-determination to not only secure a lasting place as an iconic actor, but also to transition into a major philanthropist and a powerful symbol of resilience?
We're really going to examine the cost and the monumental payoff of that drive.
When you look at the myth of Kirk Douglas,
Yeah.
the tough guy with the chin cleft and that unforgettable intensity, it's just impossible to separate that professional energy from his absolute beginnings.
You can't.
The foundation of his fierce drive, as you mentioned, it was laid in crippling poverty.
It was a foundation built entirely on grit. He was born Isser Danielovich in 1916 in Amsterdam, New York.
Okay.
His parents, Brenna and Herschel, were Russian Jewish immigrants from Shabasi, which is now part of Belarus.
So Yiddish was spoken at home.
Yiddish was the language of their crowded home, and they were desperately poor.
And the sources don't just say they were poor, do they? They highlight a specific, almost shameful poverty, the kind of poverty that sets you apart even from other poor people.
Precisely. His father, Herschel Danielovich, was an alcoholic ragman, and in the socioeconomic hierarchy of the time, that was the lowest of the low.
The lowest rung on the ladder.
Douglas said that himself in his autobiography, The Ragman's Son. He stated that even in the poorest part of town, Eagle Street, he said, the ragman was on the lowest rung on the ladder, and I was the ragman's son.
Wow.
His childhood was marked by unhappiness and just a volatile atmosphere because of his father's neglect and even physical abuse.
It sounds like that environment created a survival instinct that became his primary mode of operation for the next century.
It was pure survival and a desperate need to escape. He described it as a fire being lit under him.
And he had to work a lot.
An astonishing number of jobs. To support his mother and his 6 sisters, he held over 40 jobs by the time he was a young man.
40?
He was delivering newspapers, working as a janitor, selling snacks to the mill workers around Amsterdam. Every single penny was a fight.
The drives that fueled him to survive also fueled his intellect. I mean, how does a kid from that kind of background, with absolutely no financial resources, navigate the path to higher education?
That's almost unheard of for the era.
Exactly.
It speaks entirely to his self-determination. He managed to secure an interview with the dean at St. Lawrence University.
He just showed up.
He didn't have the funds, but he presented a list of his high school achievements and, he convinced the dean to grant him a loan.
And to repay that loan and just survive at college, he worked constantly.
Constantly. He was the janitor for the university, he worked as a gardener, and he was a star on the wrestling team.
Wait, a standout wrestler who then wrestled in a carnival? That's dedication.
It's the ultimate expression of his scrappiness, isn't it? He needed money during the summer, so he entered carnival wrestling contests.
That combination of physical toughness and academic ambition is just perfectly Kirk Douglas.
It is. And he managed to graduate from St. Lawrence in 1939.
And his next leap brought him into contact with the people who would, define his future.
It did. He secured a special scholarship to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, the ADA, in New York City.
ADA, okay.
And this is where he made 2 absolutely pivotal connections. The first was with Betty Joan Persky.
Who would become Lauren Bacall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the second was Diana Dill, who became his first wife.
It's such a classic Hollywood story, isn't it?
Yeah.
The struggling actor relying on his friends.
It is, and Bacall was instrumental. She acknowledged she had a wild crush on Kirk, and she helped him survive the brutal reality of being a starving artist in New York.
How so?
Well, the sources mentioned she lent him money. She gave him an old coat of her uncle's. He was so destitute at one point, he actually spent a night in jail because he had absolutely no other place to sleep.
And he was still known as Izzy Dembski at this point, wasn't he?
Correct. Isser Danielevich became Izzy Dembski being his uncle's surname, which he often used growing up. But the final transition to Kirk Douglas happened right before his wartime service. He legally changed his name to Kirk Douglas before joining the U.S. Navy in the early 1940s.
And this wasn't just some casual name change. This was a professional necessity common for that generation of actors.
Absolutely. The sources confirm it was standard practice in Hollywood for actors who had what were considered unusual or foreign-sounding birth names.
Right. You think about other stars of his generation who simplified their identity for the marquee.
It was a calculated career move.
Let's talk about his service, because it was far from a simple press tour. He saw serious action.
He did. He joined the Navy in 1941 and served as a lieutenant junior grade. He was a communications officer on anti-submarine warfare vessels.
And his service ended early.
It did. In 1944, he was medically discharged after sustaining injuries from a premature depth charge explosion.
Wow.
He spent 5 months recovering in the hospital. This was a critical physical and psychological interruption in his life.
After the Navy, he returned to the tough grind of acting. And the radio work he did is often overlooked, but the sources really emphasize its importance.
They do, and Douglas himself later noted the immense value of that training. He worked in network soap operas.
Right.
And the rigor of daily radio drama was fantastic for developing vocal strength, inflection, consistency. He later lamented that generations of actors after him missed out on that specific discipline.
And then came the call that launched his career, directly tied back to his time at ADA.
The call came because Lauren Bacall was now an established star, and she was a friend of Hal B. Wallace, a major producer.
So she put in a good word.
She recommended this intense young actor, Kirk Douglas, and Wallace listened. This led to his film debut in 1946, The Strange Love of Martha Ivers.
In that first film, he played a character that stands in stark contrast to the persona he would become famous for.
He played a weak, insecure, somewhat sniveling man,
Yeah.
a character emotionally hiding behind alcohol.
And the sources are all unified on this point.
They are. Martha Ivers was the last time Kirk Douglas ever allowed himself to portray a weakling on screen.
He made a decision.
He immediately recognized that his true cinematic power lay in strength and intensity, no matter how unlikable the character was. And that realization that he needed to pivot toward raw intensity, it immediately defined his strategic professional choices,
Right.
starting with his breakout role just 3 years later.
Which was Champion in 1949, the role that cemented the tough guy image, but it required a huge financial gamble for him.
An enormous gamble, and this shows his incredible strategic sense. He was betting on quality over immediate profit.
So what was the choice?
He was offered a highly lucrative role in an MGM film, The Great Sinner, which would have paid him 3 times the salary.
Okay, so big money versus...
Versus the lower-paying, much tougher and riskier role of the unscrupulous boxer Midge Kelly in Champion.
And that gamble paid off spectacularly.
It did. The Great Sinner flopped, and Champion was a sensation. It earned Douglas his first Academy Award nomination.
And the critics noticed.
Oh, they did. Film historians at the time praised his portrayal as alarmingly authentic. They specifically noted the iconic physical manifestation of his intensity, the patented snarl and grimace.
That became his signature.
That became the physical language of his persona.
So he wasn't interested in being subtle. He wanted to be noticed and, in a way, feared.
He was keenly aware of the need to cultivate a larger-than-life image to survive the brutal competition of the studio system. He even articulated this philosophy perfectly.
What did he say?
I don't think I'd be much of an actor without vanity, and I'm not interested in being a modest actor.
That's very direct.
This self-belief, rooted in overcoming his impoverished past, propelled him not just as an actor, but as a businessman.
And that brings us to his revolutionary move to disrupt the studio contract system. For an actor in 1949, breaking free was rare and exceptionally risky.
It was a massive statement of independence. In September 1949, Douglas refused to be bound by typical long-term studio contracts.
And what did he do instead?
He established his own production company, Bryna Productions, named after his beloved mother.
Bryna.
This move gave him the power to choose his projects, control the scripts, and dictate his level of involvement. A path that very few major stars had the clout or, frankly, the audacity to follow at that time.
And the roles he chose after gaining that control are legendary for the sheer physical and psychological toll they took on him. He became known for completely immersing himself.
Yes, the sources often describe his acting style as that of an action painter, meaning he didn't just study a role, he violently inhabited it.
Can you give an example?
For Detective Story in 1951, he spent days embedded with the NYPD, actually witnessing interrogations to understand the raw tension of that environment.
But the most famous example of this immersion, the one that earned him his third Oscar nomination, was his portrayal of Vincent van Gogh in Lust for Life.
That was a transformational experience, both professionally and personally painful. He refused to break character.
And the director, Vincente Minnelli, he saw that.
He did. Minnelli, who was a frequent collaborator, called his eventual performance a moving and memorable portrait of the artist, a man of massive creative power triggered by severe emotional stress.
There's an anecdote about his behavior at home during that shoot, illustrating just how far he took this commitment.
It's incredible. His wife, Anne, later recounted how frightened she and the children were.
Frightened.
He would come home every night in the Van Gogh persona, wearing the heavy, red, ragged beard and the clunky boots, stomping around the house, still consumed by the role's agony.
Wow.
He later admitted the experience was so painful, staying in character and internalizing Van Gogh's suffering, that he was just relieved when the shoot was finally over.
His independent path also led him to collaborate with visionary directors on challenging, non-commercial material. And sometimes that resulted in immediate failure that only later revealed itself as genius.
The perfect example is Ace in the Hole from 1951, directed by Billy Wilder.
An amazing film.
Douglas plays a completely cynical, manipulative reporter trying to turn a tragic accident into a national media spectacle. Douglas's performance was praised for its intense focus, being as right now as a sharpened knife.
But I understand the film itself was a disaster at the box office. Why did audiences reject it?
It was too raw, too cynical, and far too critical of the media and public voyeurism for 1951 audiences.
Ahead of its time.
Completely. It was seen as ruthless and cynical, and it was a commercial flop, which temporarily hurt both Douglas and Wilder. Yet today, it is regarded as a masterpiece of social criticism, one of the finest films of the decade.
Which is a testament to his willingness to bet on challenging content through Brainer Productions.
It is. But he did demonstrate versatility. He found massive commercial success with the lighter adventure film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1954.
Before we move on to his role as a producer and his political stances, we have to address the complex nature of his personal life. It often existed in the shadows cast by his professional intensity. In 1949, during the filming of Young Man with a Horn, we have the dark, unresolved anecdote concerning Gene Spangler.
This is a sad and complex case that remains officially unsolved. Gene Spangler was a bit actress working on the same film who disappeared in October 1949.
And days later, her purse was discovered.
It was, near Griffith Park.
And inside the purse was a note that directly referenced him.
Yes. The unfinished note was addressed to a Kirk, and it mentioned a Dr. Scott. The text read, "Can't wait any longer. Going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while Mother is away."
Douglas, who was married to Diana Dill at the time, he immediately contacted the police when he heard the news.
He did. He was interviewed by telephone. He emphatically denied being the Kirk referred to in the note.
He said he barely knew her.
He confirmed that while he had talked and kidded with her a bit on the set, he had never been out with her socially.
And the sources highlight that Spangler's friends informed the police about something critical.
Yes, that she was approximately 3 months pregnant.
And this detail suggests a disturbing possibility that many scholars have speculated on.
That the reference to Dr. Scott and the note's urgency suggested she may have been seeking an illegal abortion.
Which were tragically often dangerous, sometimes fatal operations conducted clandestinely at the time.
Exactly. And despite the focus on the name, no concrete connection was ever established to Douglas, and the case remains open. It's just a dark footnote to the era. The independence Douglas fought for forming Brainer Productions was a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, while it gave him the creative freedom to tackle roles like Van Gogh and Ace in the Hole, it also exposed him to enormous personal risk.
Financial risk.
Particularly financial risk, which came to a head with a massive crisis involving his longtime agent.
This reveals a massive blind spot for a man so focused on control and escaping poverty, his agent was deeply betraying him.
It was a betrayal he didn't see coming because he trusted the man as a friend, almost a father figure. For about 15 years and across 27 films, his agent was Sam Norton.
And the structure of that relationship was the problem.
It was. Norton was both his agent, taking the standard 10% agency fee, and a partner in his law firm, Rosenthal and Norton, taking an additional 10% law fee.
20%.
Which was already exorbitant, but the deception went far deeper.
So who finally sounded the alarm?
It was his second wife, Anne Biden's. She had a keen, almost European distrust of the business side of Hollywood.
Her suspicions were raised early on.
They were. Norton tried to pressure her into signing a prenuptial agreement on her wedding day without Kirk's knowledge. Her distrust deepened when Norton convinced Kirk to guarantee the financing for a Broadway play that flopped immediately.
And she acted unilaterally, which was a remarkable move considering the era and the traditional roles of wives in Hollywood.
It was decisive. Anne hired the accounting firm Price Waterhouse behind Kirk's back to audit his finances.
So Douglas comes home from filming.
And he's confronted with a staggering reality. The audit revealed that Norton had channeled Douglas's investments through complex dummy companies that Norton himself owned.
He was effectively stealing his money.
Yes. But the fraud wasn't just theft. It included catastrophic financial mismanagement that implicated Douglas himself.
Wow.
Due to Norton's disastrous tax advice errors, the IRS was demanding a massive payment of $750,000 in owed-back taxes.
For a man who had scraped his way out of destitution, finding out he was nearly bankrupt and owed $750,000 must have been
Devastating. He had virtually no liquid assets left.
This sounds like a moment of total psychological crisis. How did he respond?
He responded with the intense decisiveness we would expect from him. He immediately fired Norton and hired new counsel.
Did he get his money back?
He only recovered about $200,000 in cash, but the firm, Rosenthal and Norton, was forced to relinquish all their rights to his future film income and, critically, their stake in his blockbuster film, The Vikings.
And it was that financial disaster, that utter loss of control, that made the success of his next production not just desirable, but utterly essential for his financial survival.
And that production was Spartacus.
Spartacus,
Yeah.
released in 1960, a gargantuan undertaking.
It was an epic film with a massive $12 million budget. Douglas was both the lead actor and the executive producer via Brina Productions. His entire financial future was riding on its success.
Which gave him unprecedented control over every aspect of the film.
It did, and it was this control that he leveraged for one of his most celebrated and still debated acts of political courage.
Breaking the Hollywood blacklist.
He chose to hire Dalton Trumbo to write the screenplay.
Trumbo was one of the infamous Hollywood 10.
A known member of the Communist Party, and he'd been blacklisted by the studios for years, forced to write under pseudonyms like Sam Jackson.
Douglas didn't just hire him secretly, though. He insisted on giving Trumbo an official on-screen credit.
He did, and this was seismic. In an industry still terrified of anti-communist backlash, seeing Trumbo's name credited was a moment of profound political significance.
And Douglas later cited this as his proudest achievement.
His single proudest achievement of his career, he said he helped give Trumbo back his name.
But the sources bring nuance to this claim, suggesting it wasn't strictly the first crack in the wall.
That's the controversy we need to explore. While Douglas's decision was monumental and brave, director Otto Preminger had publicly announced his intention to credit Trumbo for the screenplay of Exodus months earlier.
In January 1960.
Exactly. And Spartacus premiered later that year. So while Douglas provided one of the most visible and consequential breaks, the movement was already starting.
And further complicating this narrative of moral courage, Douglas didn't maintain that stance universally.
That's the critical piece of insight. The sources reveal that Douglas later denied Trumbo a requested screen credit on his subsequent film, Town Without Pity.
Why?
Douglas admitted this was out of fear, worrying about the long-term career repercussions of being seen as too closely tied to the blacklist's abolition. It shows the incredible complexity and the personal risk calculus involved, even for a star of his magnitude.
Regardless of the political credit, his power as a producer was absolute. Filmmaker Melville Shavelson gave a great description of Douglas's demanding work ethic.
Shavelson described Douglas as highly intelligent and obsessively detailed. He would read every single line of every actor in the script.
Every line.
And would argue every scene with the director until he was completely convinced of its correctness. This was not a passive star. He was the driving force behind the entire production.
And that drive led to one of his most famous, turbulent collaborations, particularly with director Stanley Kubrick.
He brought Kubrick onto Spartacus after replacing the initial director.
They had worked together previously on the brilliant 1957 film Paths of Glory.
And that earlier collaboration provides the perfect illustration of Douglas's producer power. Paths of Glory is about French soldiers facing execution during World War I, and its ending was supposed to be grim and unrelenting.
But Kubrick changed it.
Kubrick and one of the writers had changed the ending to something commercially softer, sparing the soldiers' lives, to appeal to a wider audience.
And Douglas, who financed the project, was furious.
Furious is an understatement. Douglas, upon seeing the new ending, called Kubrick to his room and unleashed a tirade.
What did he say?
He reportedly told Kubrick he called him every four-letter word I could think of and yelled, "I got the money," based on that original script. Not this shit.
Wow.
Douglas made it clear they were reverting to the dark, uncompromising ending, where they weren't making the picture. That raw, uncompromising artistic vision was entirely Kirk Douglas.
It's interesting how he maintained these tense, demanding relationships, yet his partnership with Burt Lancaster was so enduring and professional.
They were the ultimate yin and yang duo. They made 7 films together over 4 decades.
Starting in 1947.
With I Walk Alone and concluding with Tough Guys in 1986, they were both independent actor-producers of the same generation, fixed in the public imagination as a team. They had competitive rivalry, but it was matched by a deep, mutual professional respect.
Finally, we cannot discuss Douglas's producer legacy without bringing up the rights to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
A film he never starred in but made possible.
Right.
He was the producer and star of the 1963 Broadway play based on Ken Kesey's novel, but the crucial decision was how he secured the film rights.
He used what the sources call an innovative loophole.
He did. Instead of buying the rights directly from Kesey's novel, which would have given Kesey more creative control, Douglas bought the rights based on the stage play itself.
So the loophole allowed him to maintain control over the adaptation, even when Kesey objected to certain elements.
Precisely. Kesey hated the play and the changes made to his novel, but when Douglas retained the film rights based on the stage version, it allowed him to bypass the author's future objections to the movie adaptation.
And why did he eventually relinquish the starring role of McMurphy? He seemed perfect for it.
He did, but by the time the film was ready to be made, a decade later, Douglas felt he was too old for the role.
So what did he do with the rights?
In an incredible act of legacy transfer, he gave the rights to his son, Michael Douglas.
Who then produced the Oscar-winning 1975 film starring Jack Nicholson.
Yes. And Michael later reflected on the moment, saying, "I'm old enough now to understand that you get maybe 4 really good parts in your life if you're lucky, and that certainly seemed like one of those parts to my father."
Moving now to his long and complex personal life. Douglas lived to be 103, and his relationships, particularly his second marriage, provided a fascinating look at the pressures and realities of Hollywood stardom.
He had 2 marriages. His first, to Diana Dill, lasted from 1943 to 1951, producing his sons Michael and Joel.
And his second marriage was his defining one.
It was. To Ann Bidens. They married in 1954 and were together for 66 years until his death.
She had a very different background.
Very different. She was a Belgian-German refugee who fled Nazism and worked initially as a film subtitle translator.
And their marriage was famously structured on an open understanding regarding his infidelities.
It was. Douglas was publicly frank about his numerous affairs with women, often co-stars and starlets.
And Anne accepted this.
She did. Reflecting on the realities of being married to a Hollywood icon, she stated that as a European, she accepted his behavior, believing it was unrealistic to expect total fidelity in a marriage.
But while she tolerated the affairs, she was the fierce protector of his long-term financial stability.
As we saw with the Sam Norton scandal.
Exactly.
Tragically, their family life also included devastating loss.
Yes. Their youngest son, Eric Douglas, who was an actor and comedian, struggled severely with addiction.
And he died young.
He died in 2004 at the age of 46 from a lethal overdose of alcohol and drugs, a loss that profoundly impacted the entire family.
There is also that dramatic, almost cinematic story from 1958 demonstrating Anne's intuition, which may have saved his life.
It's an incredible piece of oral history. Douglas was good friends with the flamboyant producer Mike Todd, who invited him to fly on his private plane to New York.
But Anne had a bad feeling.
She felt an inexplicable, uneasy feeling about the trip and pleaded with Kirk to take a commercial flight instead.
What happened next demonstrates the power of that intuition.
After a heated argument, Douglas, in a fit of temper, refused to go at all. The very next morning, Douglas and his family heard the news on the radio.
The plane had crashed.
Mike Todd's plane had crashed, killing everyone on board. It was a terrifying random moment of fate that solidified Anne's place as his protector. His long life was punctuated by several near-death experiences, which seemed to force a spiritual reckoning.
That's right. The first major turning point was in 1991 at age 74 when he survived a helicopter collision above Santa Paula Airport.
And that crash killed 2 other people.
It did, and that experience triggered a profound shift.
This led him back to the faith of his childhood.
He began to embrace the Judaism of his youth, a spiritual journey he documented in his book, Climbing the Mountain, My Search for Meaning.
So he reconnected with his roots.
He realized that escaping his poor Jewish roots had also meant abandoning his faith, and he spent his later years reconciling with it. He famously stated it took a long time to learn, you don't have to be a rabbi to be a Jew.
Just a few years later, he faced his most visible public health crisis, threatening his entire identity as a performer.
In 1996, at the age of 79, he suffered a severe stroke that caused aphasia, severely impairing his ability to speak.
The prognosis was initially grim.
Very grim. Doctors feared the loss of speech might be permanent.
But the relentless determination that defined his acting and producing career kicked in for his recovery.
He underwent months of intensive daily speech therapy, focusing all his famed intensity on relearning basic communication.
And this struggle paid off just 2 months after the stroke.
It did, when he was able to accept an honorary Academy Award. He surprised the audience by speaking a few emotional, though halting words. It led to a massive emotional response from the audience. He chronicled this painful yet victorious recovery in his book, My Stroke of Luck.
And finally, we must fulfill our responsibility to impartially report on the very serious allegations concerning actress Natalie Wood, which surfaced later in his life.
This is a challenging topic that requires extreme sensitivity, and we must adhere strictly to the facts and allegations as reported in the source material.
We acknowledge the profound seriousness of this claim and maintain sympathy for the victim in discussing the documented facts.
Yes. The sources detail the allegation that Douglas raped actress Natalie Wood in the summer of 1955. At the time, Wood was just 16 years old.
And Douglas was 38. The allegation first appeared in a biography of Wood, but without naming the alleged perpetrator.
That's correct. It was initially publicized anonymously in 2001 in Suzanne Finstad's biography of Natalie Wood. It received renewed attention in 2018, particularly after Douglas was honored at the Golden Globes.
And at that time, news organizations referenced a blog post.
A 2012 anonymous blog post that had publicly named Douglas as the perpetrator.
But the claims became publicly tied to his name and confirmed by Wood's own family later.
Yes. In 2021, Lana Wood, Natalie Wood's sister, published a memoir where she publicly named Douglas as the assailant.
What did she allege?
According to her memoir, the attack occurred inside the Chateau Marmont Hotel during an audition process and reportedly went on for hours.
And when these specific allegations gained widespread attention, what was the response?
Douglas's son, Michael, issued a brief statement, "May they both rest in peace." Given the enormous intensity, ambition, and complexity of Douglas's life, his final decades were marked by a monumental commitment to philanthropy, a commitment that actively worked to alleviate the kind of hardship he had personally experienced.
The scale of his benevolence is truly remarkable. He and Anne had committed to donating the vast majority of their estimated $80 million net worth to charitable causes.
And their philanthropy was strategic and targeted. A major focus was healthcare, particularly for those in the film industry.
Right.
They donated over $40 million to Harry's Haven, an Alzheimer's treatment facility at the Motion Picture Home, and later provided an additional $15 million donation to expand it into the Kirk Douglas Care Pavilion.
And their dedication extended directly to addressing social issues, particularly homelessness, which mirrors the precariousness of his early life.
Exactly. Anne Douglas was instrumental in founding the Anne Douglas Center for Homeless Women at the LA Mission. It's been crucial in providing shelter and services to hundreds of vulnerable women.
A direct response to the kind of struggle he knew intimately.
It is. He also generously supported his alma mater, St. Lawrence University, with a $5 million donation, helping future students overcome financial barriers similar to his own.
And his most direct, tangible philanthropic legacy is rooted right in the neighborhoods of Los Angeles.
That's the one I love. He and Anne were responsible for a major initiative that rebuilt over 400 playgrounds for the Los Angeles Unified School District.
400.
Think about the impact of that. A man who was the ragman's son, ensuring that thousands of children had safe, modern places to play and develop. He also heavily supported the arts, notably through the opening of the Kirk Douglas Theater in Culver City in 2004.
Beyond domestic charity, he also served as an international ambassador.
He and Anne acted as goodwill ambassadors for the U.S. Information Agency, traveling to more than 40 countries.
What did they do?
They spoke about the importance of democracy, freedom, and the arts, often receiving high praise for their unassuming commitment. This dedicated public service earned him the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Jimmy Carter in 1981.
And Carter highlighted that Douglas did this almost invariably without fanfare.
That's right.
Despite his famous intensity and demands on set, the industry recognized his contributions throughout his career, culminating in the highest honors.
Indeed. He won the Golden Globe for Best Actor for Lust for Life. He received the Kennedy Center Honors in 1994, the French Légion d'honneur in 1990, and the Screen Actors Guild Lifetime Achievement Award in 1998.
But the most emotionally resonant award was the honorary Oscar he received in 1996, coming just 2 months after his debilitating stroke.
That moment was critical. The Academy gave him the honorary award for 50 years as a creative and moral force in the motion picture community.
And that recognition, coming right after he had fought back from a stroke that threatened his ability to speak.
It symbolized his ultimate resilience and reinforced his status as an industry giant who had fundamentally changed the rules of Hollywood production.
He lived an incredibly long life, becoming a rare centenarian.
He was celebrated worldwide upon reaching 100 in 2016, and he remained active in the public eye even past that point, notably serving as a blogger for the Huffington Post.
Making him arguably the oldest celebrity blogger in the world at the time.
You'd have to think so. His final screen role, a television movie, was in 2008.
Kirk Douglas died in 2020 at the incredible age of 103, and his wife Anne followed him a year later in 2021 at the age of 102.
They are buried together alongside their son, Eric. When we analyze Douglas's enduring impact, the through line is absolute will. He was a true force of nature in classic Hollywood. He achieved and maintained power through what he described as a constant fight. His decision to break studio contracts and launch Bryna Productions was more than just a creative move. It was a revolutionary business model that established entrepreneurial independence for actors.
And provided the platform for him to challenge political conformity, like the blacklist.
At immense personal risk.
His life presents a monumental set of contradictions, a testament to the idea that icon status is rarely simple.
That's a good way to put it.
He was often described as abrasive and difficult. He even once wryly referred to himself as probably the most disliked actor in Hollywood. Yet he transformed into a dedicated philanthropist, a devout man who embraced his faith later in life.
And a fierce patriarch whose professional legacy continues directly through his sons, Michael, Joel, and Peter.
Right.
Ultimately, Kirk Douglas's story is a detailed psychological study of the cost and reward of drive. His cripplingly impoverished childhood fueled an explosive acting style and a consuming need for control that led to professional triumph, financial independence, and later the ability to fund ambitious, high-impact philanthropy.
He took the trauma of the lowest rung and used it to build a skyscraper of success.
He did.
So considering the full scope of his personal struggles, his profound professional achievements, the very serious shadows cast by later allegations that challenged the narrative of the moral force, and his monumental charitable efforts, what does his story ultimately reveal about the requirements for achieving true, lasting icon status in American culture?
Well, it suggests that the price of such status is not just talent, but an uncompromising complexity, a willingness to take existential risks, and a relentless refusal to ever stop climbing the mountain.
Thank you for joining us for this exploration of the life of Kirk Douglas. Thanks for listening.